They thought it was just steam, rising soft from the base of Tank 6B like breath on a cold morning, barely visible, quickly gone. The kind of thing you ignore when deadlines push harder than safety briefings ever do. But one man didn't ignore it. He didn't even speak. He just paused his mop strokes, narrowed his eyes at the metal sweat, and wrote down the time in a notebook no one knew he carried. If you still believe that quiet men with steady hands keep the world turning, men who never asked for praise, only the right to keep watching, like and subscribe, because this story will remind you that real leadership wears boots no one salutes anymore. The janitor's name was Daniel Booker. Most just called him Book. Not Mr. Booker, not Sir. Just Book. Short for that guy with the mop who never smiles. He cleaned the east hallways at Lockridge Chemical 6 days a week, clock in at 5:58 sharp, clock out at 3:01. Always in a faded jacket with a patch from a security firm that closed before half the staff was born. He was polite. Didn't say much. Walked like he was measuring every step, heel, then toe, slight hitch in the left knee. No one asked why. Most didn't even notice. Until the day production stopped mid-cycle because of something he saw, and something far bigger he never said. The story doesn't begin in a control room or board office, but in the dim break room, next to the vending machine that always jammed on B7. That's where Tony Castell, plant manager and part-time loudmouth, first noticed Book lingering by the emergency exit, just staring at the pressure display printout like he could read a language no one else spoke. "You all right there, Pops?" Tony had asked with a chuckle, a paper cup of burned coffee in one hand. "Gauge broken? Or are we hallucinating now?" Daniel didn't answer. Just blinked once, then pushed his cart toward the outer corridor without a word. "Weird guy," Tony muttered, but not cruelly. Just the kind of thought you say aloud when someone doesn't fit. Book didn't fit, not really. He watched too closely, walked too precisely, and kept records like someone expecting war. The younger guys joked about it. "Old man's building a bomb shelter," one said. "Or writing fan fiction for OSHA," another added, snickering. They didn't know he once led live containment drills in desert bunkers so classified they didn't have names, only code phrases and burn bins. No one knew, because Daniel never told them. Not even when they laughed. Not even when they rolled their eyes as he paused to knock on a tank space and mutter, "That doesn't sound right." The plant was running hot that month. New federal contracts, bigger quotas, tighter margins. Tony was stretched thin, siding off on double shifts and praying the ancient filtration system wouldn't hiccup again. When the low-pressure alert blinked yellow on console 2, he dismissed it like a kid swatting flies. Probably a calibration thing. "We'll cycle diagnostics Friday." Friday never came. Wednesday did. And on that Wednesday, Book was mopping the north walkway when he saw it again, a faint shimmer on the floor beneath Tank 6B. He stopped, kneeled slowly, touched the damp patch with the back of his hand. It hissed. A chemical trace, low grade, but not harmless. He stood, looked up at the vent fans, calculated airflow, tank size, internal pressure, backdraft vectors, all without a calculator, without saying a word. Then he quietly walked to the maintenance office, left a single sheet of paper under the supervisor's door. For words, Tank 6B is leaking. He didn't sign it. He didn't have to. The handwriting was precise, upright, like military reports. No one read it until the next afternoon, when the smell finally reached the upper catwalks. But by then, something had changed. Valerie, a new intern from Tech College, had seen Book earlier that morning staring at the tank again. She'd asked what he was looking for. He just said, "Something that doesn't belong." Curious, she followed him when he left. Watched him open his notebook behind the dumpster and draw something in airflow diagram. It was labeled with initials and pressure values. Not doodles. Calculations. Later that day, while taking inventory, she Googled Daniel Booker military, just to see. What she found didn't feel real. She cross-checked 3 citations, a declassified out file, and a black and white photo from Desert Shield. Same eyes. Same scar on the left temple. Colonel Daniel Booker, U.S. Army Chemical Corps. Retired. Honorably. Multiple times over. Valerie printed the profile. Took it straight to Tony's office. "That janitor you keep calling Pops wrote the containment manual the Pentagon still teaches. You might want to stop laughing." Tony thought she was exaggerating. Then he looked at the photo. The eyes didn't lie. Later that evening, just before the leak escalated, Tony found Daniel on the floor, kneeling with a wrench, tightening a lower valve. Not his job. Not in his jurisdiction. No gloves. No hazmat. Just instinct and memory. "What are you doing?" Tony asked, half in shock. Saving your quarter, Daniel replied calmly. And maybe your lungs. Why didn't you tell anyone? Tony asked. I did, Daniel said, holding up the notebook. It was filled with diagrams, timestamps, leak calculations going back weeks. No one listened. That was the first time Tony Castell halted production for an emergency review not triggered by software. The first time someone read a notebook that wasn't bound in corporate branding. And the last time anyone called book just the janitor. Because when silence speaks with experience, it echoes louder than alarms. And this wasn't the first leak Daniel Booker had stopped, just the first one where they finally noticed. The morning after the leak, the plant felt different. Not in a big, dramatic way, no sirens, no evacuations, no ribbons of tape flapping in the wind. Just a thick quiet, like the building itself knew it had nearly failed and was too embarrassed to say so. Tony called an emergency meeting. Not the kind with donuts and half listening, but the kind where every shift lead showed up early and sat straighter than usual. And there I was, mop in hand, badge still saying facilities, temp, standing in the back like I always did. No one told me to be there. No one ever did. But when you've seen enough near misses disguised as routine, you stop waiting for invitations. I listened as Tony fumbled his way through an update. Words like incident, mitigated, and protocol review landing like pebbles in a well. The foreman nodded. One of them cracked a nervous joke about B7 still jamming, but nobody laughed. Not this time. Then Valerie stood up, young voice steady, holding a printout in both hands. Before we move on, she said, there's something you should know about Mr. Booker. I froze. I hadn't asked her to say anything. I'd hoped she wouldn't. But she read it anyway, my service record, the citations, the years in the field with a unit that didn't officially exist until 20 years after we disbanded. A few faces turned toward me. Not with ridicule this time, but with something I hadn't felt in decades, respect, laced with shame for not seeing it sooner. Tony blinked like he was seeing me for the first time. Why didn't you tell us? He asked, voice low. I looked around at the room full of people who had walked past me, laughed about the way I tested valves with my knuckles or how I always carried that notebook. Would it have changed anything? I said, and no one had an answer. Later that day, Tony shut down production across 4 tanks. Not because I asked him to. I didn't. He did it because he finally read the entries I'd logged, dates, times, anomalies, little things the automated systems weren't catching. I had seen it with my eyes, my ears, my hands, things machines couldn't sense because they weren't built to feel tension in the air or smell acid burn from 50 feet. He called a third-party safety auditor the next day, and by the end of the week, they confirmed it. Structural fatigue in free junctions, microscopic fractures the sensors had missed entirely. If Tank 6B had gone another 48 hours without correction, the leak would have turned into a breach. And a breach meant vapor release. In a closed plant. With no outbound ventilation scheduled until Monday. Tony didn't speak to me much that week. Not because he was angry, because he was ashamed. I didn't need his apology. I'd seen it happen before, men with power who didn't know how to say thank you until a crisis passed. So I kept mopping. Kept watching. They let me into the monitoring room for the first time on Friday. Let me. As if I hadn't already diagrammed it from memory months ago. But I nodded, grateful all the same. I pointed out 2 inconsistencies on the feed calibration, one of which was dismissed last quarter as sensor drift. They fixed it by noon. The next Monday, the department quietly installed a new process, weekly manual checks of pressure seams by trained personnel. Not digital. Manual. I didn't say anything, but they asked if I'd be willing to train someone. I said yes. I trained Valerie. She had the eyes for it. Curious. Not eager, but observant. That's what you need in crisis mitigation, not panic, not force. Observation. Patience. It was her idea to name the new routine the Booker Suite. I told her it wasn't necessary. She said it was. That same afternoon, Tony approached me by the boiler shed, holding something in his hand. A small metal tag with my name etched into it. D. Booker, Safety Ops Consultant. I know you never asked for recognition, he said. But I can't let people keep calling you the janitor when you're the reason this place is still standing. I took the tag, held it for a second, then tucked it into my jacket pocket. Didn't put it on. Didn't need to. I'd been called worse by better men. But still, it meant something. Not the title. The acknowledgement. That night, I closed the tank locks, checked the valve seals one last time, and locked the mop closet behind me. Same as I always did. But when I turned, something was different. Two engineers standing near the exit paused and nodded, deliberate, full nods. Not the kind people give out of obligation. The kind they give when they finally understand. Not what you do, but who you are. The next morning, a new sign appeared outside the utility wing. I didn't know about it until I walked past and saw it myself. A brushed steel plate mounted above the access door, freshly drilled. For words, integrity sees what sensors miss. No one said it out loud, but I knew what it meant. And maybe for the first time in a long while, I felt something shift. Not in the air. In the people. Not just because of what almost happened, but because of who had been standing in plain sight, warning them long before the alarms ever rang. I didn't hear the announcement. I wasn't in the office that morning, not when Tony sent the email or when the plant PA system buzzed to life with a flat voice saying, "All hands to Bay 3, mandatory safety presentation." I was already there, polishing the last of the railings along the catwalk. I figured it was just another talk on ladders and gloves, maybe a refresher on chemical symbols. But when I turned around, they were all filing in shift crews, engineers, line managers. Even the corporate liaison in her spotless flats and a clipboard she never looked up from. Then Tony walked in, holding something under his arm. Not a safety binder. A photo. And next to him was Valerie, wearing a hard hat a little too big for her head and a nervous expression like she'd just swallowed a bee. "Before we begin," Tony said, tapping the mic until the speaker squealed, "there's something we need to get right." He cleared his throat and looked out across the sea of uniforms. "You all know Daniel Booker. Some of you called him Book. Some of you didn't call him anything at all." The room was quiet. Most of us thought he was just a janitor. Turns out, he's the reason none of you are wearing hazmat suits this week. Turns out, this man, he held up the photo, spent 27 years keeping people alive in situations worse than anything our emergency drills ever prepared us for. The photo showed me in uniform, younger, upright, a desert storm behind my shoulders and sweat on my brow, one arm slung around a fellow operator, both of us grinning like the sun wasn't trying to kill us. I hadn't seen that photo in years. I'd sent it to a friend and forgot it even existed. But someone found it. Valerie, most likely. The silence in Bay 3 wasn't uncomfortable. It was dense. The kind that hangs in the air when something true settles into a room. Tony set the photo down and turned to me. "Mr. Booker," he said, nodding. "Would you say a few words?" I froze. I hadn't spoken in front of more than 2 people in years. And certainly not to a crowd that once saw me as part of the scenery. But I stepped forward, slowly, not because I wanted to speak, but because I knew I had to. I looked out at the workers, the ones who once smirked at my notebook, the ones who used to leave muddy boot prints without thinking twice. And I said, "There's no glory in stopping a leak. No medals for noticing rust or walking the same fence line every morning. But if you ignore the small things long enough, they'll remind you they weren't small." I paused, let the silence hold. This place runs because people care. About things they don't get credit for. I don't need anyone to salute. I just need someone to pay attention. Because the things that go wrong the fastest are always the things that waited the longest to be seen. I stepped back. Didn't expect applause. Didn't want it. But they clapped anyway. Not loud. Not rowdy. Just real. One after another, workers came up to me in the break room over the next few days. Some brought coffee. Others just said, "Thank you, sir," like it meant something. Maybe it did. A week later, they were named the Safety Command Protocol, the Booker Directive. I told them to call it something else. They didn't. A new intern asked me why I never corrected people when they overlooked me. I told her, because recognition doesn't fix leaks. Discipline does. She wrote that down. Maybe it'll stick. The last day I worked there, I came in like always, no fanfare, no badge ceremony. Just one more shift, one more round for the vents, one more sweep by Tank 6B. When I left, I slid my keys across Valerie's desk. "You'll need those," I said. She blinked. "Wait, you're leaving?" "Time someone else took the watch," I said. She stood and saluted. A real salute. Not perfect, but full of meaning. I returned it. Only time I had since the day I left the service. The next morning, they found something taped to the inside of the maintenance closet. My old notebook, now laminated and framed. Beside it, a small plaque that read, "He saw what we didn't, and he didn't need a rank to do it." I don't know who put it there. Doesn't matter. What matters is this: the plant didn't break. No one got hurt. Not because the system worked, but because someone was watching when the system didn't. If you're still listening to this story, remember, heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes, they just carry a mop, walk quiet, and see what everyone else is too busy to notice. And if that means something to you, if you believe quiet courage still keeps this world standing, then hit that like and subscribe button. Because the world still needs eyes like books. Even if most folks never see them until it's almost too late.